So today we're going to learn how to properly operate a saw. Before we begin working on the table saw, there's a few things we need to go over on proper safety for working in a shop. You see here that I have a pair of safety goggles. Got to keep our eyes protected. We don't want any sawdust or any chips of wood flying into our eyes because it can be potentially harmful to our eyes, causing temporary blindness or even worse, permanent blindness. Another thing that we need to take care of is our hearing. As you see here, we have a pair of earmuffs. Earplugs work just fine as well. We're working around power tools that are going to be extremely loud. We got to make sure that we're protecting our ears. You see here that we have our table saw, which I have everything set on. You see that we've got the different parts. Here we've got the fence. We've got the table. We've got a guard here that pops off to allow us to get in there to change the blade. We always want to make sure we have a sharp blade, so when the blade's dull, that's how we change it. We've got our power button here, flip on and off with a safety switch on it as well. So if I take that safety switch off, there's no way to turn it on. As you can see, this has got a knob here. This knob is for adjusting the height of the blade as well as adjusting the angle. We can adjust this angle to be at about a 45 degree, anywhere from a 90 degree to a 45 degree angle when we're cutting our piece of wood. As you can see, this fence is a little bit on the broken side, but there's our fence lock and adjustment, so when we move our fence to the size we need it to be, we just have to lock it. And this one's a little tough considering it's on the broken side. So you can see here that we have our adjustment saw blade. When not in use, the saw blade should be all the way down. We should make sure that we don't leave it up in case something were to happen. When we are working with the saw and we are adjusting anything or we are changing saw blades, we always want to make sure it's unplugged from the wall. This is a permanent way to be able to make sure that we do not have the saw come on while we're working on it, because these saws are really sharp and extremely dangerous. If you were to get your fingers in there, it would chop your fingers off. Not to be a scare factor, but we do want to make sure that we're being careful. When we're cutting a piece of lumber, we want to make sure that we have our saw blade set at the correct height. Now with that, I've got a partial 2x6 here that I'm going to demonstrate on. And as you can see, I'm raising the blade right now to show you what the correct height would be for the adjustment. Now to measure it, we want to make sure that we put the blade or the piece of lumber up next to the blade so we can see where our teeth are. When looking at this, we want to be able to see the teeth just above the blade or the board itself. Now, as you can see there, the teeth are just above the board. So when we cut this, we're not going to run the risk of, we could cut through our finger, but we're not going to cut our finger off if something were to happen and our finger was to slip across the board. We're going to be extremely careful when we do that, of course. We don't want to run the risk of that ever happening. So I'm going to demonstrate how to cut the board properly and make sure we're using things in a way that is safe and not going to hurt us or anyone around us. So when working with power tools, we have a couple of other rules that we like to use. One of them that comes in really handy is the 4-inch rule, and that is making sure you keep your hands, fingers, anything 4 inches away from the saw. Also, girls, if you have long hair needs to be up in a ponytail or bun or some way that it's not going to be hanging down in front of your face where it could potentially get caught in a saw, get stuck in the saw. You don't want that to happen. You don't want to lose your hair. Another thing, clothing. Clothing is extremely important. If you're wearing a hoodie, that's fine. Just make sure those hoodie strings are taken. They're tucked inside the shirt, because if they're tucked inside the shirt, they're not going to get caught. We don't want any loose, baggy clothing, jewelry, watches, anything like that, any bracelets. Those need to be taken off. You're not allowed to wear those in the shop around the tools, because if those were to get snagged by a saw blade, no telling what could happen. It could be very dangerous. So we want to make sure that we're just being extremely careful with anything that we're doing when we're around power tools. So things to remember: eye protection, ear protection, 4 inches away, no baggy clothing, and no jewelry. If you follow those rules, you'll for sure be safe in the shop, and you'll know that very little could happen.